There is a paradoxical moment immediately following clinical death, where biological functions cease, yet awareness is said to persist. In this exact window, consciousness detaches from the physical form. For a brief period, the newly separated entity occupies the exact same spatial coordinates as the biological corpse, perfectly superimposed before slowly drifting out of alignment. The mind remains awake. It processes thoughts and commands, but the physical body, the hardware it used for a lifetime, no longer receives the signal. Traditional religious models frame this transition as a divine mystery. It is treated as an event beyond human comprehension, something that demands faith rather than analysis. A specific body of esoteric literature approaches this transition as a mechanical event, governed by strict rules of energy transfer. Approaching the afterlife as a mechanical system with discoverable laws shifts the study of death out of theology and into a framework of speculative physics. This systematic approach is the foundation of Parlok Vigyan, a text that translates to The Science of the Afterlife, authored by Arun Kumar Sharma. The curation and presentation of this deep dive into Sharma's esoteric philosophy comes to us through the work of Pawan Thakur at Thakur Property Consultancy. This diagram maps Sharma's core thesis. Looking at the top right section, it makes an explicit claim, bridging the mundane and mystical through a scientific lens. The author argues post-mortem existence is governed by discoverable laws operating on energetic physics. To test the internal logic of this system, we will trace the chronological path of a newly deceased entity. We will analyze the initial state of spiritual swoon, define the atmospheric medium of ether, and decode the geometric map of the astral planes. Proving that this framework functions logically requires us to map these parallel environments step by step, starting from the second the biological system fails. This page from the original Hindi source text documents the immediate psychological state of a human following physical death. It defines a condition called Atmik Morcha, or the spiritual swoon. In this state, the deceased entity is often unaware that they have actually died. Anchored to their last known physical coordinates, the entity behaves like a phantom. They remain near their biological body, observing their immediate surroundings and watching their family members react to the death. Unaware of their condition, the entity attempts to interact. They try to speak, to offer comfort, or to pass urgent messages to their grieving relatives. Every attempt fails. No matter how much willpower the entity exerts, they cannot manipulate physical objects or produce audible sound. Sharma's text specifies that this isolation is a mechanical transmission error. The hardware on both sides of the divide is operating, but the medium between them prevents the signal from connecting. The parapsychological explanation for this transmission failure is detailed further down the page. The text introduces the core mechanical concept of the afterlife, a substance called ether, defined here as the subtlest air. This is the operational medium of the subtle realm. A strict spatial rule governs this substance. The concentration of ether is inversely proportional to the presence of physical, biological air. Where gross physical air is dense, ether is thin. Consequently, ether reaches its maximum density in environments where physical air is entirely absent. Living biology requires coarse air to propagate sound and movement. The deceased entity, stripped of biology, is now trapped inside a dense field of ether. These distinct mediums operate at incompatible frequencies. The physical world moves through a slow matrix, while the etheric vibrates through a refined particle field. When the separated subtle body tries communicating, its high-frequency signal hits the dense physical barrier and dissipates. The impenetrable wall separating the living from the dead in this framework is a matter of fluid dynamics and atmospheric density. Eventually, the entity processes this failure. The spiritual swoon breaks, and the localized confusion ends. At this moment, the individual realizes their physical death and fully accepts the parameters of their new form, which the text categorizes as a desire body or vasana sharir. The text defines a specific spatial relationship for this new existence. The subtle realm is located strictly parallel to and superimposed directly over the physical earth. Sharma asserts that this invisible parallel architecture has been mapped and categorized since prehistoric times. Drawing on historical Hindu classifications, the text divides these overlapping architectures into distinct zones, primarily the Vasana Lok and the Sukshma Lok. Awakening in this version of the afterlife means realizing you occupy a parallel geography. You share the same spatial coordinates as the living world, insulated by a different density of matter. The cover artwork of Parlok Vigyan provides the visual schematic for how these overlapping zones are structured. This cover functions as a literal, ontological map of the invisible realms, drawn through the lens of energetic physics. The entire system is built around a central structural pillar, identified as the triple sphere alignment. This vertical axis acts as a main conduit. It represents the primary flow of cosmic energy that anchors the parallel dimensions in place. The three spheres positioned along this central beam map the precise pathway the soul takes as it ascends, shedding the heavy densities of the lower realms to navigate the thinner layers of ether. Energy radiates outward horizontally from this central pillar. These specific wavelengths generate the distinct, layered environments of the surrounding realms. The artwork translates the raw physics of atmospheric density and etheric vibration into a navigable structural blueprint of the beyond. Zooming out, we observe the macro architecture of Sharma's system. Stretching outward is the astral energy grid, forming the boundaries of the subtle realms. These intersecting red and white geometric patterns visually document the vibrating frequencies of ether, illustrating energy distributing uniformly across the void. We map geographical zones directly onto the structure. The dense physical world, Bhulok, occupies the core. Moving outward, layers transition into the subtle environment of Sukshmalok. Layering these zones demonstrates how multiple realities occupy the same space. Vibrating at different frequencies prevents physical interaction. Combining the rules of scientific methodology with the spatial geometry of a mandala creates a logically consistent ecosystem that operates parallel to our own. Parlok Vigyan applies the language of physics to the transition of consciousness, a phenomenon typically regarded as an impenetrable esoteric event. It isolates the initial communication failure of the spiritual swoon, explains that failure through the fluid dynamics of ether, and maps the resulting environment across a rigid geometric grid. The final question is one of utility. What do we gain by attempting to systematize the afterlife with such rigid precision? Applying discoverable laws and geographical maps to the moment of death replaces the terror of the unknown with a solvable equation. Arun Kumar Sharma's framework provides a highly structured, scientifically navigable dimension of continued existence, offering a clear schematic for the post-biological experience.